Pokémon is such a massive franchise that it's a near inevitability that all of us will forget about certain aspects or details of it here and there. I am no stranger to that, even if I spend hours of my life talking about Pokémon right here on this channel. I am no expert, but I have been playing and experiencing this franchise since I was a little kid, so I've no doubt got years of misconceptions built up, things that I'm willing to share. This isn't going to be small stuff like not remembering a Pokemon can learn a certain move, or not knowing how to pronounce their name. No, this is big stuff that fundamentally alters the way that I perceive the franchise, games, or certain Pokemon, or at least ones that I did for years, before I finally realized that I was wrong. So let's take some time to be honest with ourselves, and let's dive into some of my former biggest misconceptions surrounding the Pokemon franchise. The first major misconception that I had for the longest time is one that I think is pretty common, or at least before online discourse became a huge thing, and that's the idea that Rotom is a legendary Pokemon. I know, blatantly false, but can you put blame on me or anyone else for having this idea back in 2007? When Diamond and Pearl came out, Rotom was just a one-of-a-kind optional encounter in a secluded location in the game, and it even played the legendary battle music when you fought it in the old chateau. To 8-year-old me, it was presented as powerful, rare, and important, so there's no wonder that I thought this bad boy was a legendary Pokemon. It wasn't until Pokemon Platinum, 2 years later, that we finally got more information on this Pokemon in the form of alternate typings and appearances, dispelling a lot of mystery around this Pokemon's function in-game and place in the Pokemon world. Not to mention that it became quite popular in competitive battling settings. Nowadays, kids probably think Rotom is just one of the most common and well-known Pokemon, appearing in countless accessories like the Pokédex itself, plus tons of regular encounter opportunities just like any other Pokemon. However, I will never forget those 2 years of my childhood where I was certain I had found a little-known legendary Pokemon of my own, forever cementing Rotom as one of my favorite ghost types to this day. Next is one that I had much later in life, when initially playing through Generation 7 Sun and Moon for the first time. Like many other people I'm sure, I incorrectly assumed that the totem Pokemon Laurentis was a bug type, not a grass type. Now this doesn't change too much considering they both share two primary weaknesses in fire and flying, but that only fuels the misconception, because those were the attacks that I used against this Pokemon for quite some time. It wasn't until I caught one of my own that I realized that this was in fact a pure grass type, much to my shock. I mean, it looks like a mantis bug, right? Well, it's pretty interesting and it made me appreciate the Pokemon 10 times more that it's not a bug type. It's supposed to be a true grass type, a plant-based organism just like any other flower Pokemon, that has the unique adaptation of mimicking a mantis bug Pokemon, perhaps to resemble more fearsome Pokemon like Scyther. In real life, this mimicry is often reversed, with a real-life species of mantis, the orchid mantis, taking on the visual traits of orchid flowers to blend in. Here, Laurentis is an orchid flower, taking on traits of a mantis to blend into the jungle as well, just in a different way, now mimicking an active predator rather than foliage. Interesting, right? While I initially didn't get it, once I realized that I, in real life, was fooled by this Pokemon's mimic, just as everyone in the Pokemon world likely was at first glance, well, I appreciated Laurentis all the much more. Now this next one is pretty embarrassing considering that it has no basis in anything, visual or otherwise. It's just an idea that I came up with for years and years. That being the idea that Steel type is weak to water. Why did I think this? Well, I can't really be sure, but I can think of a few possible reasons. Firstly, a lot of Steel-type Pokemon are dual-typed with Ground or Rock, two types that would actually make that Pokemon itself weak to water. I guess I encountered enough of these guys to think that this water weakness came from the Steel-type, not Ground or Rock, but it doesn't make too much sense considering that I likely encountered just as many Steel-types who don't have a water weakness for obvious reasons. So I guess I just ignored those in my mind. I don't know. Another possible reason is because I personally tend to mentally group certain Pokemon types together for one reason or another. I am not a competitive player, so I don't even know if these types make sense together, but I think it's often based on common dual typings or at least one shared weakness throughout the entire group. Perhaps even Pokemon under these type groups tend to share some kind of visual similarity, so I blend all their possible types together if that makes sense. So I guess this grouping of ground, rock, and steel kind of makes up the larger mineral type. A bunch of gem-based, dusty, rugged, heavy Pokemon found in caves, tunnels, or mountains. Since ground and rock are both weak to water and grass, I lumped in steel and assumed there was one shared weakness there as well, with water. I also grew up by the beach, and from a young age knew that salty, moist air from the ocean always rusts everything metal that you leave outside. So whatever of these reasons may have caused it, that's certainly the biggest type misconception that I ever had with Pokemon. Now, let's end on something that I am thoroughly embarrassed by because it's possibly the dumbest minor misconception that you could make, and one made much worse because I believed it until literally a few months ago when I got the idea for this video. So, you know the Pokemon Bronzong? I've always found it super neat, probably because it has a cool shape, with those long arms on the side capable of bending as a form of expression and movement. Naturally, I superimposed my human biases, incorrectly thinking that Bronzong was just a metal bell man, with the bell portion serving as the torso, the arms as, well, the arms, and that gap between the top of the bell and where the arms meet curved as the head. As a psychic type, I just assumed that this negative space was, in essence, Bronzong's face, almost like a reverse version of its pre-evolution Bronzor, which is just a round, small face. Can you blame me? Inanimate Pokemon have all kinds of weird expressions, or lack thereof. The issue is that I knew Bronzong was based on a bell, so I always assumed the patterning on its bell torso was just that, patterning, like an ornate ancient bell. For years and years, I simply tuned out its face, which is now so obvious when you consider the bright red eyes and actual mouth sitting right there.
What is wrong with you?
I was floored. How could I walk this earth for over 2 full decades before seeing Bronzong's true face? If I existed in the Pokemon world and I had a conversation with Bronzong, I would have made eye contact with the top of its body, completely ignoring its actual face. How rude is that? Regardless, I've learned from my mistakes and now know to look down when trying to read the expression of my Bronzong buddies, even if they aren't that expressive to begin with, which is probably where this misconception came from. So harmless to inconvenient to downright embarrassing, those are misconceptions that I at one point had about the Pokemon franchise. I'm sure I'll have tons more, so when I finally learn the truth, whatever it may be, I will be sure to make another one of these videos to come clean once more. What misconceptions do you have about Pokemon? Let me know down below. I want to thank my patrons for making this video possible, especially Guardian patron Dayton Wehse. If you're interested in supporting the channel and getting cool perks in return, go ahead and check it out with the link below. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time for more content.